Elias Hart lived alone on a wide piece of land at the edge of a quiet valley. Most people in town knew him as the man who worked from sunrise to sunset and spoke only when needed. He liked his peaceful life. He liked the fresh air in the morning, the smell of the grass, and the sound of his cattle moving slowly across the pasture. Every day felt the same, but he did not mind. It kept his heart calm. On one cool morning, when thin mist still hugged the ground, Elias saddled his horse, Dusty, to check on his herd near the canyon. That was the farthest corner of his land, a place he rarely visited unless he needed to. The canyon was deep, with tall rocks on both sides and narrow paths that twisted like a maze. Most cowboys avoided riding there alone, but Elias trusted his horse and his own steady hands. He rode quietly, watching the sun rise behind the hills. Everything seemed normal, until he reached the mouth of the canyon. Dusty suddenly slowed down and lifted his ears, as if hearing something unusual. Elias frowned and listened closely. At first, he heard nothing but the wind brushing against the rocks. Then, after a moment, he picked up a faint sound. It was not an animal. It was not the wind. It sounded like someone trying to breathe or call for help. But the sound was so weak that Elias almost thought it was his imagination. Still, something in him pushed him to go forward. He nudged Dusty gently, guiding him deeper into the canyon. With every step, the strange sound grew clearer. It was soft, broken, and full of fear. Elias could feel his own heartbeat change. He had lived around animals his whole life. He could tell when a living creature was in trouble. But this sound was different. It came from a person. He followed it until the canyon walls closed in around him. That was when he finally saw her. A young woman hung upside down from a tree branch, tied with rough rope around her ankles. Her face was pale, her clothes dusty and torn, and her arms hung loosely toward the ground. Her long hair almost touched the dirt. She looked exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open. When she tried to move, only a soft whimper came out, as if she did not have enough strength left even to speak. Elias felt something heavy settle in his chest. He had never seen anything like this. He did not know who she was or what had happened, but he knew one thing for certain: she needed help fast. He dismounted slowly, making sure not to startle her. Dusty stayed still behind him, as if understanding the seriousness of the moment. Elias approached the woman carefully and spoke in a calm, gentle voice. He told her his name and tried to reassure her that she was safe now. At first, she did not respond. Her eyes opened only halfway, filled with fear, like she expected more harm. When Elias reached out his hand, she flinched weakly, thinking he might hurt her. He stopped and spoke again, this time even softer, telling her he would never do anything to scare or harm her. The woman blinked slowly, and it seemed she recognized that his voice carried no danger. Elias looked at the rope, checking how it was tied. He needed to free her without making the fall hurt her. He took out his small knife and cut the rope carefully, while holding her legs to prevent a sudden drop. When the last piece of rope loosened, he lowered her gently until her body touched the ground. She tried to sit up, but her arms were trembling, and her breath came in shallow gasps. Elias removed the remaining rope from her ankles, noticing how tightly it had been wrapped. He could tell she had been left hanging for a long time. She whispered something, but he could not understand the words. Her voice cracked, too weak to form full sentences. Elias knelt beside her and told her not to force herself to speak yet. He reached for his canteen and offered her water. At first, she hesitated, studying him with tired eyes. But when she realized he meant well, she took a small sip, then another. The water seemed to revive her a little, though she was still too weak to move on her own. Elias asked her if she was hurt anywhere. She shook her head slightly, though he could tell she was still in pain. She looked frightened, confused, and lost. Elias helped her sit up slowly, supporting her back with his hand so she would not fall. She leaned against him without meaning to, her strength almost gone. He spoke gently again, telling her she was safe and that he would take her away from the canyon to a warm, safe place. She tried to speak again, this time managing a few broken words. She said that some people she had been traveling with had turned against her. She said they left her here and told her she would not survive. She did not go into details, and Elias did not ask. He saw the fear in her eyes and did not want her to relive something painful at that moment. All he wanted was to get her out of this lonely canyon. He lifted her carefully, making sure not to cause her discomfort. She was light, almost too light, as if she had not eaten properly for days. Elias carried her to Dusty, who stood quietly, waiting for them. The woman looked nervous when she saw the horse, maybe worried about falling, but Elias reassured her again. He lifted her into the saddle slowly, supporting her the entire time. Then he mounted behind her, keeping one arm steady around her, so she would not slip. The ride out of the canyon was slow and cautious. Elias made sure not to jolt her or cause any kind of strain. The woman leaned slightly against him, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow but steady. Every now and then, he spoke softly, asking if she was comfortable, if she needed water, or if she felt faint. She answered, in the faintest voice, but she seemed calmer with every minute that passed. When they reached open land again, the sunlight touched the woman's face, and she closed her eyes as if feeling warmth for the first time in a long while. Elias noticed the small change and felt encouraged. He did not know her name yet. He did not know where she came from, but he felt responsible for her safety now. Something inside him pushed him to protect her, to make sure she received the care she clearly needed. The journey back to his ranch took longer than usual because he kept the pace slow. Along the way, Elias continued observing her, making sure she did not faint or lose balance. She whispered a few times, trying to say something, but the words faded before reaching her lips. Elias told her gently that she did not need to say anything now. She only needed to rest and breathe. When the ranch finally came into view, a simple wooden house surrounded by open fields, the woman seemed relieved. She exhaled softly, as if letting go of a heavy weight she had been carrying. Elias guided the horse to the porch, dismounted, and then helped her down with great care. Her legs could not hold her, so he lifted her again, making sure she felt secure in his arms. She was too tired to resist, and she rested her head on his shoulder as he carried her inside. The house was warm and simple, but safe. Elias set her down on the softest place he had, a small bed near the fireplace. He covered her with a blanket and placed a pillow behind her back. She looked around with slow eyes, taking in the peaceful room, the gentle crackle of the fire, and the calm presence of the man who had rescued her. She whispered one last thing before falling into a deep, much-needed sleep. She said a quiet thank you. Just 2 small words, but they carried the weight of everything she had been through and everything she felt at that moment. Elias nodded and told her she was safe now. Then he sat nearby, keeping watch, knowing that her life had changed the moment he heard those faint, broken sounds in the canyon, and his life had too. When the young woman woke up the next morning, she did not open her eyes at first. She felt a soft blanket over her, and the warm air from a fire nearby. For a long moment she simply lay there, listening to the quiet room, trying to understand where she was. The last thing she remembered clearly was hanging in the canyon, feeling hopeless and alone. She remembered a calm voice, steady hands, and strong arms lifting her to safety. She remembered the rancher. When she finally opened her eyes, she saw a wooden ceiling and the soft glow of the fire. She slowly turned her head and saw Elias sitting in a chair not far from her. He had fallen asleep while watching over her, his hat resting on his knee and his arms folded lightly over his chest. She looked at him quietly, studying the kindness in his face. His presence did not frighten her. Instead, she felt a strange sense of safety, as if the room itself was protecting her. Her eyes grew warm, not with fear, but with relief. She tried to speak, but her throat felt dry. Elias stirred at the small sound and opened his eyes. When he realized she was awake, he sat up straight, his expression gentle and relieved. He told her she had nothing to worry about and asked if she felt any pain. She shook her head softly. Then, he offered her water, holding the cup carefully so she would not spill it. She drank slowly, grateful for the fresh taste. Elias asked her if she could sit up on her own. She tried, but her body was still weak. Without hesitation, Elias placed a steady hand behind her back and helped her rise. She leaned slightly against the pillow, breathing slowly as she adjusted to the new position. For a moment, she did not speak. She seemed unsure how to begin or what to say. Elias waited patiently, giving her time. After several quiet seconds, she whispered her name. She said her name was Mara. It was the first clear word she had spoken since he found her. Elias repeated her name softly, so she would know he heard her. She told him she did not know where she was at first, and she was afraid of waking up alone. He assured her she was safe in his home, far from the canyon. He explained that he had stayed near her the whole night, in case she needed anything. Mara looked around the room again. The bed was neatly made, with clean sheets and a warm blanket. She noticed a small bowl of fresh water on the table, and some bread wrapped in cloth. She realized he had prepared everything so she would not feel afraid or confused when she woke up. A quiet gratitude filled her eyes. Elias brought her a small bowl of warm soup he had made earlier in the morning. He told her it would help her regain strength. Mara hesitated at first, but he smiled and said he had cooked it himself, hoping she would like it. His gentle tone eased her worry, and she took a few careful spoonfuls. The warmth spread through her body, giving her a strange sense of comfort she had not felt in a long time. Slowly, as the food eased her weakness, she began to speak. Elias did not rush her. He simply listened. Mara explained that she had been traveling with a small group, hoping to reach another settlement. She had trusted them at first, thinking they were just fellow travelers. But over time, she noticed they had different intentions. They argued often, and when they got into trouble for taking things that did not belong to them, they blamed her. Mara had tried to stop them from doing wrong, and that made them turn against her. She said they grew angry when she refused to follow along with their plans. Instead of letting her go, they decided to leave her in the canyon in a terrible way, believing she would not survive. Her voice trembled as she shared the memories, but she did not cry. Elias listened with quiet understanding. He did not interrupt or ask unnecessary questions. When she finished speaking, he told her calmly that none of what happened was her fault. He told her she had shown courage by standing up for what was right, even when she was alone. His words seemed to lift a heavy weight from her. She lowered her gaze, trying to hide the emotion that rose inside her. Mara asked Elias why he had gone into the canyon that morning. He said he had been checking his cattle, the same as every other day. He told her that hearing her faint sounds was something he could never ignore. He said he believed he was simply at the right place at the right time. Mara looked at him quietly, knowing that if he had arrived even an hour later, she might not have survived. She whispered another soft thank you, but Elias shook his head gently and told her she did not owe him anything. Elias then stood and walked toward the window to check the sky. The weather looked calm, with sunlight beginning to spread across the valley. He told her he planned to send word to the sheriff about what happened, because it was important that the men who mistreated her were held accountable. Mara grew nervous at the mention of them, but Elias reassured her again, saying she was safe here and no one would come near the house without him knowing. After sending a message through a passing rider who often delivered supplies, Elias returned to the house and checked on Mara again. She was sitting more comfortably now, her strength slowly returning. He asked if she needed anything else, but she shook her head. She seemed content, just knowing she was no longer in danger. As the day went on, Elias showed her around the inside of the house, so she would feel less like a stranger. He kept his movements slow and careful, so she would not feel overwhelmed. He showed her the kitchen, the small wooden table where he ate, the shelf where he kept books and small tools, and the peaceful corner near the window where sunlight always fell in the afternoon. Mara admired the simple beauty of the ranch house. It felt warm and honest, like a place where troubles could not easily enter. Mara told Elias she had never stayed in such a quiet place before. She said the silence made her feel safe, and Elias smiled softly, saying, "The valley always had a way of calming the heart." He placed a chair near the fireplace for her, and she sat there while he prepared lunch. She watched him move around the kitchen, noticing how gentle he was with everything. Even the way he washed dishes or stirred the pot showed patience and care. Throughout the afternoon, Mara rested near the warm fire. Elias kept himself busy with small chores around the house, but he always stayed close enough to check on her. He brought her a warm drink and made sure she remained comfortable. Mara watched him quietly sometimes, studying the man who had saved her life. She wondered why he cared so much when she was a complete stranger. But every time their eyes met, she saw nothing but kindness, so she felt no fear. Later, when the sun began to lower, Elias returned from the barn with a soft blanket. He gently placed it around Mara's shoulders and told her the evenings often got chilly. She nodded gratefully. As she held the blanket close, she felt warmth spread through her heart. It was not only the fire. It was the feeling of being treated with respect. After days of fear, Elias asked her again if she wanted to talk about anything, but he made it clear she did not have to. Mara thought for a moment, then shook her head. She wanted silence, not because she was scared, but because the peace of the ranch made her want to rest her thoughts. Elias understood immediately and sat quietly in the nearby chair, letting the room fill with the soft sound of the fire crackling. As night approached, Mara felt her eyelids grow heavy. She hesitated before lying down, as if unsure if she deserved so much comfort after what she had endured. Elias noticed the hesitation and told her gently that she needed rest more than anything. He promised he would stay close by again, just in case she needed help during the night. That reassurance allowed her to relax. She lay down slowly, letting the blanket wrap around her. Before sleep pulled her away, she whispered something so soft that Elias almost missed it. She said she felt safe here. She said she had not felt that way in a long time. Elias did not respond with many words. He simply nodded, letting his calm presence speak for him. He stayed awake for a while after she drifted into sleep, thinking about the strange way life brought people together. He had started the day like any other, expecting nothing unusual. But now, a fragile life rested under his roof, depending on him for safety and strength. The responsibility did not scare him. Instead, it reminded him that even a quiet life could suddenly become meaningful. As the fire glowed softly and the stars appeared outside the window, Elias sat quietly, watching over Mara with the same steady patience he had shown all day. She slept peacefully, knowing the rancher who saved her was near. And though neither of them knew what the next days would bring, one thing was clear: they were no longer strangers. A bond had begun forming, one built on trust, kindness, and the quiet promise that she would never be left alone in danger again. The next morning arrived quietly on the ranch. Soft sunlight touched the fields, and a light wind brushed across the grass. Elias stepped outside before dawn, the same way he did every day, but this time, his mind was not fully on his usual chores. He kept thinking about Mara resting inside the house. He wondered if she had slept peacefully, or if her memories had bothered her during the night. Before he started feeding the animals, he paused near the porch and looked back at the door, making sure everything inside remained calm. When he heard nothing except the soft crackling of the fireplace, he took a breath and continued with his work. Inside, Mara slowly woke up. She felt stronger than the day before, but her body still felt tired. The warmth of the blanket and the gentle light coming from the window made her feel calm, something she was still getting used to. At first, she sat quietly, listening to the morning sounds, the soft clucking of hens, the distant neigh of a horse, and the steady footsteps of Elias moving around outside. Each sound reminded her she was far from danger. When Elias came back into the house to bring firewood, Mara looked at him with grateful eyes. He asked her if she needed anything, and she told him she was fine, though still a little weak. Elias nodded and told her to take her time recovering. Mara slowly tried standing on her feet for the first time since she arrived at the ranch. Elias stayed close just in case, but she managed to stand on her own, using the side of the bed for support. She felt a small sense of achievement. She walked a few steps, though her legs trembled slightly. Elias offered his arm, and she accepted it with a soft smile. He guided her to the window so she could see the field outside. The open sky and the fresh air made her feel free again, as if the valley itself wanted to give her comfort. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful. But far from them, in a different part of the valley, the men who had abandoned Mara had reached a small town. They had hoped to remain unnoticed, but news traveled fast. Someone in town mentioned that a rancher had found a woman in the canyon and taken her to safety. When the men heard this, they exchanged worried glances. They knew that if she spoke to anyone, especially a sheriff, their actions would be revealed. Panic began to grow among them. Instead of leaving the area, they decided to return secretly, hoping to find Mara before the law did. They believed if they reached her first, they could silence the truth. Their intentions were dark, but their fear of being caught pushed them toward reckless decisions. Around midday, while Elias was chopping wood near the barn, he noticed something unusual. There were fresh tracks, near the gate tracks, that did not belong to him or his animals. He bent down and examined the footprints closely. They were not from boots, he recognized. The soil showed clear impressions, and the direction suggested someone had been watching the ranch from a distance. Elias felt a quiet tension grow inside him. He straightened up slowly, scanning the open field. Though he saw no one, his jaw tightened just a little. He did not want Mara to worry, so he walked calmly back to the house. Mara was sitting at the table, sipping warm tea Elias had prepared earlier. When he entered, she noticed a change in his expression. She asked if everything was all right. Elias smiled softly, saying nothing was wrong. But she sensed something was weighing on him. Mara had learned to read people during her travels, and she could tell when someone was hiding worry behind calm words. Elias eventually told her gently that he had seen some tracks near the gate, nothing certain, but enough to make him alert. Mara's face paled slightly. She whispered that the men might have come back. Elias placed a steady hand on the table and assured her that he would not let anyone near her. He said the sheriff would also arrive soon, as he had already sent word the previous day. Mara nodded, trusting his words, yet a part of her still trembled inside. She walked to the window slowly and looked out at the ranch. The peaceful land suddenly seemed bigger, as if danger could hide anywhere among the wide fields. Elias moved closer and reminded her she was not alone. He told her he would stay alert and keep watch over the house. Mara took a breath and tried to calm her thoughts. The afternoon passed quietly, but Elias remained watchful. He checked the area around the house several times, moving with quiet steps, listening for anything unusual. Dusty, his horse, also seemed restless, lifting his head every time a faint sound echoed from the distance. Elias trusted his horse's instincts. Animals often sensed things before humans did. Mara watched Elias from the window, noticing the way he scanned the trees and the way his eyes followed even the smallest movement. His carefulness gave her some peace. As the sun began to set the light turning golden across the fields, the silence broke. Elias heard faint footsteps behind the barn. He motioned for Mara to stay inside, and stepped out quietly. When he reached the side of the barn, he saw the shadow of a man moving quickly. Elias called out, asking who was there, but the figure ran off. He did not chase him. He did not want to leave Mara unprotected, and he suspected there were more men nearby. Instead, he returned to the house, closing the door behind him. Mara asked with worry in her voice what had happened. Elias told her someone had been watching them, but had run away when he was spotted. Mara's hands trembled slightly. She said the men wanted to make sure she stayed silent. Elias placed a firm hand on her shoulder and told her she did not have to fear. He said he had already made up his mind. He would protect her no matter what. He moved a chair near the door and kept his tools close, not as weapons, but as a sign of readiness. He made sure every lock on the door and windows worked properly. Mara watched him, appreciating how calm he stayed even when danger approached. As night arrived, the atmosphere grew heavier. Outside, a few distant voices whispered among the trees. Elias and Mara exchanged a silent look. The men had returned. Then came a louder call. Someone shouted for Elias to come out. Another voice demanded Mara be handed over. Mara stepped back, fear tightening inside her. Elias, however, remained steady. He walked to the door, opened it just enough to see outside, and warned the men to leave. He told them the sheriff already knew everything and was likely on his way. The men were angry and shouted back, trying to scare Elias. But he did not raise his voice. He simply stood his ground with quiet strength, refusing to let fear enter his home. Mara peeked from behind him, seeing the men standing a few yards away, their faces tense and desperate. Elias stepped outside enough to block their view of her. He told them again that they needed to leave before things got worse. The men argued among themselves, unsure whether to flee or push forward. Just when the tension reached its peak, the sound of approaching horses echoed across the valley. The men froze. Elias recognized the familiar rhythm of sheriff horses. A moment later, lantern light shone from the trail leading up to the ranch. The sheriff and 2 deputies arrived quickly, their horses moving between Elias and the men. The sheriff demanded the men drop whatever they carried and step forward. Knowing they had no escape, the men finally surrendered. Mara watched from the doorway, relief flooding her heart. Elias walked back to her, his expression still calm. She whispered that she had been so scared, but he reassured her softly. The sheriff spoke with Elias for a few minutes, gathering details. Then he approached Mara, speaking gently, asking if she felt safe. She nodded, grateful that everything had ended. When the sheriff and deputies took the men away, the ranch fell quiet again. The night sky stretched above them, calm and bright. Elias guided Mara back inside and closed the door gently. She felt her legs give out slightly, and he helped her sit near the fireplace. She looked at him with deep gratitude, knowing he had stood up for her without hesitation. Elias sat beside her, making sure she felt secure. He told her the danger was gone and that she could rest now, without fear. Mara looked into the warm fire and whispered that she did not understand why he cared so much. Elias simply replied that some things in life were not about reason. They were about doing what felt right. She felt her heart soften at his words. For the first time since she had been found, Mara closed her eyes without fear. Elias stayed close, watching over her with the same quiet strength that had guided him all along. And though neither spoke about it, both understood that what happened that night had changed something between them. The bond that had begun to form was no longer fragile. It was real, steady, and filled with trust. The night after the sheriff took the men away was the first peaceful night Mara had in a long time. She slept deeply, without fear waking her or shadows chasing her dreams. The fire burned softly in the corner, filling the room with warm orange light. When she woke the next morning, she felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted from her chest. She could breathe fully. She could think clearly. She even felt a tiny spark of hope she thought she had lost forever. Elias was already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. He glanced up when he heard her footsteps and smiled gently. It was a simple smile, quiet and sincere, but it carried so much warmth that Mara felt safe all over again. She moved slowly toward the table, still adjusting to being on her feet. Elias immediately pulled out a chair for her, making sure she sat comfortably. He asked her how she slept, and she nodded, saying she felt like the night had washed away some of her fear. Elias prepared breakfast, fresh bread, warm soup, and a little bit of fruit he had saved for her. Mara watched him and realized how much effort he put into every small thing. It wasn't just about feeding her. It was about giving her comfort, giving her space to breathe, and showing her respect in every action. When she thanked him, he simply nodded again, as if kindness was something natural, something expected. While they ate quietly, Mara looked out the window and saw the open fields stretching far into the distance. The valley looked beautiful in the morning sun. She realized she had not truly seen her surroundings the last 2 days because her mind had been too overwhelmed. But now, with danger gone, she could see how peaceful the ranch was, how simple, how honest, how full of quiet life. After breakfast, Mara offered to help with chores. Elias shook his head at first, saying she should rest, but Mara insisted softly. She said doing something would make her feel normal again. Elias understood and agreed, but he made sure to give her only the lightest tasks. She fed the hens, carried a small bucket of water, and watched Elias repair a fence near the barn. The wind moved gently through her hair, and for the first time in days, she felt like herself again. Not lost, not scared, just a woman living a simple moment on a quiet ranch. As she worked beside him, she noticed Elias glanced at her every few minutes, checking if she felt tired. His quiet concern was something she had not experienced from anyone for a long time. Mara wondered how a man could be so gentle, yet so strong at the same time. She felt something warm grow inside her, something beyond simple gratitude. She tried to push the thought away, not wanting to assume anything, but the feeling stayed in her heart. Later in the day, the sheriff returned briefly to update Elias. Mara stayed inside, but she watched from the window. She saw the sheriff shake Elias's hand and speak with a serious expression. Elias nodded, listened carefully, then looked back at the house as if checking on her even while talking. When the sheriff left, Elias came back inside and told Mara that the men would be held accountable. He assured her that the law was handling everything now, and she would not have to face those men again. Mara felt her eyes grow warm. Not from fear, this time, but from relief. The rest of the day went smoothly. Mara helped Elias prepare a simple meal in the evening. As they worked side by side, Mara found herself smiling more than she expected. At one point, Elias accidentally dropped a wooden spoon, and instead of growing annoyed, he just shook his head with a soft laugh. Mara laughed too, for the first time in a long time. The sound surprised even her. Elias looked at her with a kindness in his eyes that made her heart skip. That night, after they finished dinner, they sat outside on the porch. The stars were bright above them, filling the sky like tiny lanterns. The valley was quiet again, peaceful and still. Mara wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and Elias sat beside her, enjoying the cool evening air. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence between them was comfortable, gentle, and full of unspoken understanding. Mara finally broke the silence. She told Elias how lost she had felt before he found her. She said she had thought the world had forgotten about her. Elias listened quietly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. When she finished, He told her that no one deserved to be forgotten. He said every life mattered, especially hers. His voice was calm, but his words held deep meaning. Mara felt her heart soften again. She looked at him and asked why he had been so kind to her when they had never met. Elias shrugged gently. He said some things didn't need explanations. Sometimes a person just knew what was right and followed it. Mara smiled at his answer. His simple honesty made her feel safe, like she belonged somewhere for the first time in years. As the days passed, Mara's strength returned fully. She began taking on more tasks, watering plants, sweeping the porch, preparing small meals, folding clean laundry. She did these things not because Elias asked her to, but because she wanted to help. To show her gratitude in the only way she knew. Elias always thanked her softly, and every time he did, she felt warmth bloom inside her chest. Elias taught her how to handle some ranch tasks too. He showed her how to brush Dusty, how to check the chicken coop, and how to gather eggs without startling the hens. Mara found joy in these small tasks. Working with her hands reminded her she was alive, strong, and capable. She was no longer the frightened woman hanging helplessly in the canyon. She was rebuilding herself, piece by piece, in the peace of this quiet valley. One morning, as they were fixing a broken gate together, Mara stopped and looked around the ranch slowly. She took in the hills, the fields, the old barn, the wooden house that had sheltered her. Then she looked at Elias. She realized that she did not want to leave. The thought came so naturally that it surprised her. She hesitated, unsure if she should say anything. She did not want to seem ungrateful or dependent. She didn't know how Elias would react. Later that evening, while they sat inside and shared a warm drink, Mara finally gathered the courage to speak. She told Elias she had been thinking about what she would do next. Elias listened carefully, setting his cup aside. Mara told him she had nowhere to return to. Not because she was unwanted, but because her old life no longer felt like a place she belonged. She said the valley felt peaceful, like a new start. She looked at Elias with gentle eyes and admitted she wanted to stay, at least for a while, if he didn't mind. Elias sat quietly for a moment. Not out of hesitation, but as if letting her words settle in his heart. Then he nodded slowly. He told her she was welcome to stay as long as she wished. He said the ranch had always been too quiet, too empty, and that having someone around made it feel alive again. His voice held an honesty that touched Mara deeply. She felt her heart warm at his acceptance. It was not just kindness, it was a quiet invitation to become part of something steady and real. From that moment on, the ranch felt different for both of them. Mara walked with more confidence. She laughed more easily. She moved through the house as if it truly belonged to her. Elias found himself looking forward to each day, knowing he would hear her voice, see her smile, or find her waiting for him at the porch after he returned from the field. The days grew lighter, softer, and full of quiet companionship. One afternoon, as Mara watched Elias working near the corral, she realized something important. She had been saved in more ways than one. Elias had not only rescued her from danger, he had given her a chance to rebuild her life, to rediscover peace, and to feel valued again. That simple truth made her eyes soften with emotion. She walked toward him and thanked him again, but this time, not just for saving her. She thanked him for giving her a place to belong. Elias looked at her with a calm, gentle expression. He told her he hadn't done anything extraordinary. He had simply followed what his heart told him was right. Mara smiled softly, knowing his heart had been the strongest, kindest guide she could have hoped for. As the sun set behind the hills, casting golden light across the valley, Mara stood beside Elias, both of them quiet, both of them content. The ranch no longer felt like a lonely place. It felt like a new beginning built from courage, kindness, and the unexpected bond between a rancher and a woman he had saved. What started as a moment of fear in a dark canyon turned into a story of healing, trust, and hope. And though the valley remained wide and silent, The ranch now held two hearts that had found comfort in each other's presence. They were no longer strangers brought together by chance. They had become two people who saved one another in their own quiet, gentle way.